Hey there, and welcome. Today we're going to break down how you can evaluate a research report like an absolute pro. We're going to give you a simple but really powerful framework that's going to help you cut right through the noise and figure out the quality of pretty much any study you come across. I mean, think about it. We are just flooded with studies, articles, and data every single day. And yeah, some of it is totally groundbreaking, but a lot of it, well, isn't. So how do you tell the difference? How do you get that critical eye to separate the solid science from the shaky claims? That's exactly the skill we're going to build together right now.
You know, in the academic world, they have a whole formal process for this. It's called peer review. Before a study even gets a chance to be published in a good journal, it gets sent out to other expert referees in that same field. And their job, basically, is to be the gatekeepers, to judge the work, to suggest improvements, and ultimately to keep the standards high. It's a really crucial quality control step.
All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to borrow that same critical thinking and create our own toolkit, the 4-point research inspection. And I want you to think of it just like you're inspecting a house. First, we're going to check the foundation, then we'll look over the blueprints, we'll examine the structure, and finally, we'll check for the final polish and finish.
So let's start with part 1, the foundation. This is all about how the research problem is defined. And this is so important because if the foundation is weak, the entire study built on top of it is going to be unstable.
The very first thing you got to check for is clarity. A good report doesn't make you feel like you have to be a detective just to find the main point. If you can't easily figure out what the researchers are trying to do within the first few paragraphs, that's your first little red flag. And you know, beyond just stating the problem, a really strong report has to answer the question, so what? It needs to convince you that this research actually matters. Does it fill a huge gap in what we know? Does it tackle a real-world issue that we're facing? If that why is missing, the research might be fine, but ultimately it's kind of irrelevant. And the last piece of this foundation is looking at the hypotheses. Those are the specific predictions the researchers are making. Are they clear? Can you actually imagine an experiment that could prove them right or wrong? Because vague or untestable claims are a major red flag. You put those 3 things together, a clear problem, a strong reason why, and specific testable predictions, and you've got yourself a solid foundation. Without them, everything else is on shaky ground. All right, so once we feel good about the foundation, it's time to look at part 2, the blueprint. This is the methods section. It's the detailed plan that the researchers followed to build their study. You know, the absolute gold standard in science is something called replicability. It's a big word, but all it means is this. Could another researcher, just by reading this report, do the exact same experiment? The methods section should be like a detailed recipe, not just a vague little summary. Transparency here is everything for building trust in the results. Now, who did they actually study? You have to ask 2 things about the sample group. First, was it big enough? A study on 10 people is worlds apart from a study on 10,000. And second, was it representative? This just means that the sample should basically be a mini version of the larger group they're talking about. I mean, if you're studying voter preferences for a whole country, you can't just ask people in one city, right?
And this brings us to a really, really important concept, one that gets misunderstood a lot. The report has to convince you of its validity. But what does that actually mean? Okay, so validity. It sounds super academic and complicated, doesn't it? But at its core, it's incredibly simple. Validity is just asking, is this study actually measuring what it says it's measuring? So, for example, if a study claims it's measuring happiness, but it only asks people how much money they make, well, that has a serious validity problem. A good report will show you exactly how they made sure their measurements were accurate and meaningful.
All right, we've got a solid foundation and a clear blueprint, so now we move to part 3, the structure. This is where all the raw data gets analyzed and the findings get interpreted. This is really the main body of the argument.
And don't worry, you do not have to be a statistician for this one. The key question is simply whether the analysis fits the data. Did they use the right tools for the job? A credible report will usually tell you why it chose a certain method of analysis. It should feel logical, not like they just picked something out of a hat.
This one. This is the sign of a confident, high-quality researcher. They don't just push their favorite conclusion, they'll actually bring up other possible explanations for their findings and then explain why their interpretation is the most likely one. Ignoring other possibilities, that can suggest a pretty weak argument or maybe even a biased point of view.
This is where everything absolutely has to connect.
The conclusions can't just pop out of thin air. They have to be directly supported by the data they showed you. And, crucially, they need to loop all the way back and answer the original question from the introduction. A great report feels like a complete, satisfying, logical circle. And that takes us to our final stop, Part 4, the final polish. Now, these are the technical details, and they might seem small, but trust me, they are often powerful clues about the care, the professionalism, and the rigor that went into the entire project. So, here's a quick checklist. Just quickly scan for these things. Does the whole report flow in a logical way? Does the abstract, that little summary at the very beginning, actually give you an accurate picture of the whole paper? Are all the sources cited correctly? And, believe it or not, are there a bunch of distracting spelling or grammar mistakes? Sloppiness here can be a warning that they might have been sloppy with the research itself.
So there you have it. You're not just a passive reader of research anymore. You are now an active, critical inspector. You've got a practical toolkit you can use to evaluate any report that comes your way. So let's just put it all together one last time. The real power of this is how simple it is. Just remember the 4 steps of the inspection. Check the foundation. Is the problem clear? Examine the blueprint. Are the methods solid? Inspect the structure. Do the conclusions actually follow from the data? And finally, review the finish. Are all the technical details in order?
And look, this framework isn't just for dense academic papers. You can apply this same way of thinking to news articles, to market reports, even to claims you see online. It's a whole new lens for looking at the world. So the only question left is, now that you have the tools, what are you going to question next?